See? You ain't so useless after all.
Not quite.
What do you think?
If they wanted trouble, we wouldn't have seen them.
Poor bastards. We really screwed them over down here. Come on, let's not push our luck.
What happened?
Well, get in. I'll tell you.
This event, or series of events that Hosea is talking about, is actually a catalyst for a conflict between the Native Americans, or Indians, of America and the new settlers that come afterwards. I'll refer to them mostly as the US government, or US Army. Hello everyone, Prime here, and today we're going to be talking about the lore behind the Indians of Red Dead Redemption 2, as they're mostly based on real-life events and the real-life lives of the Indians. Now, when the Europeans first arrived on American soil, they were welcomed by the natives who showed them how to survive in this new, unoccupied land. As far as the Europeans were concerned, of course it was very much occupied by the Indians. The new settlers also brought with them a new foreign disease, or multiple new foreign diseases, and unfortunately the Europeans didn't mind at all that the Native Americans fell ill to some of these diseases. Now, to the Europeans, these illnesses or diseases were quite similar to the common cold, not likely to kill them in any way, but to the Indians, these were very deadly illnesses that did kill a lot of Native Americans. Now, the new European settlers didn't really, as I said, try to help the Indians, and this was partially thanks to a sense of superiority over the, as they most likely would have thought, primitive Indian tribes. Eventually, in 1830, the US government introduced the Indian Removal Act, a decree that allowed the US government to move the Indian tribes to the Great Plains. In other words, the fresh, fertile lands that they could use to grow crops and feed themselves that they were inhabiting before was taken over by the US government and the new settlers. A frontier was created on the edge of the Great Plains so that the Native Americans knew which land had been taken from them and which they could freely inhabit.
So, yes, the Indians in these parts got sold a very raw deal. Come on, we're falling behind. This is the heartlands we're going to. Good farming and grazing country, they lost it all. Stolen clean away from them it was, every blade of grass. Killed or herded up to the reservations in the middle of nowhere.
In 1851, the Fort Laramie Treaty modified the agreement between the native tribes and the government. The new understanding stated that white settlers would not enter the newly defined Indian homelands. The government also compensated the local tribesfolk with 10 years' worth of provisions, which was still a very delicate and touchy situation because the native Indians had been moved from their ancestral homelands into what was still technically their homelands, but a much less desirable part of it. In 1862, the Santee Sioux tribe relocated to their promised land that was bad for growing crops. Couple that with no payments that were promised for the government, and starvation became a real concern. Later that year, their warriors attacked government establishments, and after 3 months of conflict, the Indians were very much defeated, but as you can tell, they had no choice but to raid the government property because they would have very much most likely died otherwise. Similarly, the Cherney tribe also realized how raw of a deal the Native Americans got when they moved into the Sand Creek Reservation. They attacked wagons, trains, and stole food just to survive, but in response to this, Colonel Jivington led attacks on tribes and camps at Sand Creek. Not only did the US forces win, but they alleviated some of their aggression on the women and the children of the tribe, so I'll allow you to imagine what sort of aggression they alleviated there. The Red Cloud tribe wasn't pleased about the settlers using the Bozeman Trail, but unlike the previous tribes we've talked about, the Red Cloud tribe was actually successful in their campaigns, for the most part, at least initially, against the US government. So the tribe started attacking any travelers who passed through their hunting grounds, and in response to this, the government constructed forts and walls to try and protect the people that were trying to move across these lands, because the government also introduced acts that offered people guaranteed amounts of acres of land, about 160 acres of land at this point, should they farm the land and work there for a certain period of time. And as you can imagine, the Native Americans, the Indians, weren't happy about the white settlers impeding on their land, that it was very much agreed that it was theirs. And as you can tell, the US government at this point is backtracking on their deal. But, miraculously, the Red Cloud tribe is able to secure the forts that were constructed by the US government and secure their land. In other words, the US Army and US government abandoned those forts. The US forces also realized that the Indians were less aggressive during winter months and decided to launch campaigns against them during these times. Quite aggressive ones. But they weren't necessarily the decisive things to end the conflict. During the summer of 1876, the army attacked an Indian camp in Little Bighorn. It was supposed to be an assault from 3 sides, but General George Armstrong wasn't patient enough for that, and he decided to divide his own forces and move in and attack the Indian camp with his own forces. Not only did he end up dying, but all of his men also ended up being slaughtered by the Indians. Remember, in these conflicts, the Indians very much are at the disadvantages you can imagine. They're not using things like muskets, pistols. They're using, well, for lack of a better word, more tribal weapons, things like spears and bladed weapons along those lines. In fact, the Indians' knowledge of metals in and of itself wasn't exactly as advanced as it could have been. And not to say that their technologies were inadequate for them to live life by any means, but against the Americans they were at a significant technological disadvantage. Eventually, the new Americans started using machine guns, explosive weapons, and so it's not surprising that by 1887, the General Allotments Act saw much Indian-controlled territory divided amongst settlers. Though not all of the Indian land was taken, much of it was, and I'm guessing much of the best parts of the land was taken as well. The 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre saw the deaths of around 153 Indian men, women, and children, as some soldiers decided to open fire on them, whether they were armed or not, just massacring them. Hence why it was called a massacre, I suppose. So yes, by the time everything was all said and done, Native American tribes were scattered, defeated, they had their ancestral lands taken from them, and more or less screwed over by a lying, untruthful government that felt itself superior to them and felt their needs far outweighed the needs of the native people. But yes, that's all I have for you for now. Also, if I sound a bit different in this video, I am recording this video pretty early in the morning. I don't usually record videos this early, so yeah, I apologize for that. And watch out for the ends of a couple of my videos coming up, because I'll be announcing the Discord server soon, so yeah, that should be good. I hope that you did enjoy the video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like and of course subscribe to the channel for content just like this. And until the next video, have a very good day. I've been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.